On the last day of January 1880, a Carbonate Chronicle reporter sat down to interview a Leadville pioneer in his office at the northwest corner of Harrison Avenue and 2nd Street. Joseph H. Wells was born in England, probably Bedfordshire, in 1842. He first appeared in the United States with his large family as a 19-year-old resident of Wakarsua, Kansas Territory, during July of 1860. Probably arriving in California Gulch, as Leadville was originally known, during the later summer of 1860, he was very much like the hordes of other young men who had come to seek a fortune in the rich placer gold workings that summer. Because he did not appear on the census list for that settlement in August of 1860, he probably arrived in the Gulch in the early autumn as the cold began to settle into the valley floor from the lofty peaks. He was in the area off and on for the following decades and was elected as county clerk and recorder in 1879 at the age of 38. In 1880, he lived on Elm Street with his 24-year-old wife and 2-year-old child. The following interview is rare and a direct account of the wilderness that was California Gulch in the 1860s, nearly 2 decades before Leadville was officially founded. It is all like a wondrous dream when I shut my eyes and I recall the old times here, and open them to look upon the new, was the remark of County Clerk Joseph H. Wells yesterday as he leaned back in a sanctum chair and lighted a fresh Havana from the reporter's case. I came here in the summer or autumn of 1860, over 19 years ago, and I have been in California Gulch in the vicinity most of my time since then. I went into the Army in '62 and served a while, and I have taken a trip to the valley or east almost every winter since '60, but I have always regarded this as my home. I have seen considerable weather here, all kinds of it too, from blizzards on the summit of Mosquito Pass where we had to hang on to our hair to keep it from blowing away, to the gentlest of warm breezes blowing up the flowery valley of the Arkansas, fresh from the Gulf of Mexico. Governor Tabor and I came here one year, about the middle of May, and we were 12 hours on the road between Malta and Leadville with our teams. It was the hardest day's work I ever did. Take the winters in rotation, and they averaged about as follows. In 1860-61, fully 1,500 people wintered in California Gulch. Oro City was the principal town and the post office. It was located above the present city of Leadville, the main portion being built on both sides up the Gulch up where Thomas Starr lives, and where the Lake County Sampling Works and Gauze Brewery are now. There were cabins all along the Gulch for 2 or 3 miles above that, and all were occupied. The winter was a mild one, there being but 2 or 3 feet of snow after it had packed. There were not more than 20 or 25 females in the Gulch that winter. There was no trouble in the South Park with snow, and the roads were kept open all winter, the weekly mail arriving regularly. The previous summer, when there were 10 or 12,000 people here, they had a more frequent mail and paid 25 cents per letter to private carriers. The next winter, that of 1861-62, was also a mild one. There was more snow, but the weather was not cold. The autumn was mild and open, but the snowfall was heavy in the spring. The number of people who wintered here was smaller, there not being over 600 all told. The number of women was about the same as the previous winter. The succeeding winter, that of 1862-63, was entirely different. I left here about the 23rd of December for Denver. There had been no snow up to that time, and the road out over Weston Pass was dry and dusty. Not over 150 people wintered here, and the women were scarcer than before. Soon after Christmas, snow began to fall, and in February and March the fall was very heavy, so that in April, after it had packed down, there was 7 feet on the level. In the winter of 1864-65, the snowfall commenced early and was heavy. The weather was very cold that winter. After it had packed, there was some 6 feet of snow on a level. In the winter of 1865-66, the snowfall was lighter and the weather moderate. Father Dyer, veteran minister, carried our mail in from Fairplay that winter over Mosquito Pass, but few people wintered in the Gulch. The hardest winter ever known to white men in this Gulch was that of 1866-67. Snow commenced falling on the 10th of September, and it snowed constantly until the night of the 19th, the total fall being full 4 feet. In the South Park, the fall was heavier, and after it had packed down, there was from 6 to 8 feet of it on a level all over the park. The weather was very severe that winter. Snow kept falling, and some fellow here, who kept an accurate measurement through the winter, gave the total fall as 57 feet. Between the middle of December 1866 and the middle of the following March, there were 83 days on which it snowed. But 9 people spent that winter in this region, 1 or 2 of whom lived over in Iowa Gulch. The snow laid a long time. I came in on the 12th of June, and there was at that time from 4 to 5 feet of it on the level. Captain S.D. Breese was here then. I came up from Denver in the spring and was very anxious to get into the gulch. The road was blockaded, and I waited in Fairplay for weeks for it to be opened. Finally, Bob Berry and I started over. The only way we could cross the range was by waiting till night, when a crust would form in the snow, and thus we could travel on. The unusual length of the winter was unexpected by those who were wintering here, and the provisions they had laid in the fall had become exhausted. It being impossible to open the road or get in with wagons, a couple of men began packing provisions over the snow with shoes, and for a long time supplied the camp, being paid 50 cents per pound freight. The mail was carried over the range on snowshoes all of that winter. The winter of 1867-68 was much milder, and the snowfall was not near as heavy, although there was 5 feet on the level after it had settled. I went out on Christmas and came back on snowshoes. My route back was from Fairplay to the Salt Works and then down Trout Creek to the Arkansas. When I reached Granite, I had to put on snowshoes to come up here with. In the valley below where Malta is now, there was 4 feet of solid snow on the level when I came in. The 3 succeeding winters were very moderate ones, something like last winter. The snowfall was heaviest in that of 70-71, when it measured, as it was packed, between 3 and 4 feet on the level. Following these mild winters came the terrible one of 1871-72, which was nearly, if not quite as bad as that of 66-67. In the middle of May, when I came here with Governor Tabor, each of us drove a team, and the trip from where Malta is now up to this place occupied all of one day, and a hard day's work it was, too. The snow was then from 6 to 7 feet deep on the level, and packed hard. Since then, the winters have been mild, not much more severe than was last winter. In the spring of 1873-74, snow, when settled, measured not over 3 feet. In 1875-76, there was 4 to 5 feet of snow on the level after it was packed. Last winter was the mildest one I have yet known in this gulch. Over at Buckskin, they had some frame buildings, and when the heavy snow fell in 66-67, nearly all of the roofs were broken in by the weight of it. I remember that drifts lay in the streets there a long time. You could go into the second story of a house and climb out the window upon the snowbank, which lay level with it. The main travel to and from the gulch in those days was by the Trout Creek route, the same road that is now traveled from Buena Vista to Weston. This route was kept open for wagons all of the winter of 1863-64 or 1864-65, I don't remember which. After that, it was blockaded regularly until the winter of 1868-69, which was so mild that wagons made regular trips up to this point all winter with ease. In the winter following, the route was again closed, but in 1870-71 it was open for wagon travel all the time. There were 2 or 3 winters when the road was open below, that Scott Kelly and others kept it beaten down between here and Granite by running sleighs over it every day, but it was difficult work. No stock was ever wintered here until the winter of 1870-71, when I had 3 head here and managed to keep them through. There was an old pony left here 5 or 6 years before that, and it lingered along, picking a living here and there in the gulches until a heavy storm in January or February cooked its goose. After 1870, no stock was wintered here until the carbonate excitement sprang up in 1877. And that winter, mails and stages had been running in 2 or 3 times a week, and the stock was kept here. As far back as the winter of 1860-61, they tried to keep Weston Pass open for wagon travel, but failed. After the snow barred the wagons out, a pack trail was kept open, but this finally closed up and the snowshoe brigade brought in our mails. In the early years, Mosquito Pass was used much more than now by footmen, both winter and summer. The mail was brought over in snowshoes every winter until 1868, when they began carrying it around by the Trout Creek Road, and it came in that way until late 1877, when the travel was transferred to Weston Pass, where it has since remained. No wagons were ever hauled over Mosquito Pass until last summer. 3 men were frozen to death in the winter of 1861-62. One died in a terrible storm on the range. Another got lost in Bird's Eye Gulch and perished. Another was frozen over in Park County. I don't think there have been over half a dozen deaths from freezing in this region since 1869. In February 1862, there was a grand stampede to Hamilton in Park County. I started over Mosquito Pass with 3 men, one of whom was named Brown. An awful storm set in, and we thought we would never get over, but we finally reached timberline on the other side. One of the party had an old frying pan, and with this we scooped away the snow, which was 8 or 9 feet deep, and built a fire on the ground. The wind blew the snow into the hole so fast that we could hardly keep it out. One of my boots was wet, and I took it off to dry it. I dozed a little, and the boot burned up. I had to wrap that foot in a rag and travel all the way until we reached Hamilton that way. Meanwhile, my other foot froze, and I had a terrible time with it. Brown froze 3 of his fingers. It was the worst night I ever passed. Flour was valuable stuff in those days. There were several winters where we paid 75 cents per pound for it, and everything else was proportionately high. The staple articles of diet were flour and bacon. We used to get in a good supply of beef every fall, too. It would freeze, and we would lay it on the snow and use it as we needed it. It was just as good when 6 months old, kept in this manner, as at any time. One of the hard winters, in 1861-62, I think, when the supply of flour gave out, the camp subsisted for over 6 weeks on some coarse cornmeal that had been brought in the fall before to feed the horses. Somebody got a lot of flour over Weston Pass to Union Gulch, and I remember I bought a sack of it and packed it here in snowshoes. It cost me $30 at Union Gulch. Mr. Wells concluded his story with the assurance that Leadville need have no fears of a blockade of any length. In the exceptionally hard winters noted above, the snowfall was early and heavy, and we have not had that this winter. The constant heavy travel into the camp will now keep the road packed, and it is hardly possible that any delays more serious than those in Denver can or will occur. Mr. Wells considered this a rather mild winter and apprehends no serious trouble from heavy snows, although he says we are apt to have more snow in March and April than in all the other months before.